Emily Carter didn't run because she was weak. She ran because the man she married was slowly erasing her, and one more night would have been her last. 4 or 5 years, Jason Miller controlled everything. Not just where she went or who she spoke to. He controlled how she saw herself. He built a world where she had no one else, no identity outside of him, no place she could call her own. He made her believe she was alone. That was his greatest weapon. Every argument ended with her apologizing. Every silence in that house felt like pressure closing in. She learned to shrink, to stay quiet, to survive. Not live, just survive. And then one night, something changed. Not loudly, not violently, quietly. Emily stood in the dark, staring at Jason as he slept. The same man who broke her down piece by piece now looked peaceful, untouched by the damage he caused. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear for the first time in years. If she stayed, she would disappear completely. So she left. No suitcase, no plan, no second thoughts. She moved through the house like a shadow, careful not to make a sound, careful not to wake the man who believed she belonged to him. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and just like that, she was gone. The cold night air hit her skin, but she kept moving, fast, aimless. Every step felt urgent, like something invisible was chasing her, even though the streets were empty. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get far away. The train station was nearly deserted. Dim lights flickered overhead, and the distant echo of metal against tracks filled the silence. It didn't feel safe, but it felt like a way out. That was enough. When the midnight train arrived, she got on without hesitation. No destination, no questions, just distance. She found a seat by the window, her hand still trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. The reflection staring back at her looked unfamiliar, empty, disconnected. That was what Jason had built inside her. The orphan complex. The belief that she had nothing, that she was nothing, that without him, she wouldn't survive. And for a moment, sitting there in the quiet hum of the train, she almost believed it, until someone sat beside her. She didn't see him approach, didn't hear him, but the shift in the air was immediate. Stillness, control, wait. Emily turned slightly, and her breath caught. Alexander King. He didn't ask for the seat, didn't acknowledge her. He simply sat there, calm, composed, completely at ease, as if the world around him adjusted to his presence, not the other way around. There was no chaos in him, no emotional noise, just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was controlled and dangerous. Emily quickly looked away, her instincts tightening. She knew danger. She had lived with it for years. But this felt different. Jason's danger was loud, unpredictable, suffocating. Alexander's was quiet, calculated, the kind of power that didn't need to prove itself, the kind that already owned everything around it. He glanced at her once, not with concern, not with curiosity, but with precision, like he was studying something he could either break or rebuild. The train cut through the darkness, carrying them both forward. Emily thought she had escaped her past, but sitting beside Alexander King, she had just stepped into something far more dangerous. The train hadn't gone far before the past caught up with her. Emily felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air was subtle, but her body reacted instantly. Her shoulders stiffened, her breathing changed, and every instinct she had built from years of survival came rushing back at once. It was the same feeling she used to get before something went wrong, before a voice was raised, before control tightened around her. Someone was coming. Heavy footsteps echoed through the aisle, slow, deliberate, and painfully familiar. Her fingers tightened against the edge of her seat as a small distance she had created between herself and her old life collapsed in seconds. She didn't need to tell. She already knew. Jason Miller. Her chest locked, her thoughts scattering as his presence filled the narrow space. Nothing about him had changed. The same posture, the same calm expression, the same quiet control that always came before something was. He didn't look angry. He didn't need to. His calmness had always been more dangerous than his rage. "Emily," he said. That one word carried everything. Ownership, expectation, control. She turned slowly, forcing herself to face him even as her body resisted. Years of conditioning pulled at her, urging her to comply, to avoid escalation, to return to the version of herself that knew how to survive him. "Did you really think you could leave without saying anything?" He continued, his tone steady. "Without asking." Not a question, a correction. Emily tried to steady her breathing, but her body betrayed her. Her hands trembled slightly, her chest rising too fast, her thoughts slipping out of order. This was how it always started, quiet, controlled, and suffocating. "Get up," Jason said. Simple, direct, final. Her hand pressed against the seat as she began to move, the response automatic, trained into her over years. It wasn't a decision. It was survival. But before she could stand, something shifted beside her. Alexander hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't made any sudden movement. Yet the space around him changed in a way that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was controlled, precise, and completely unshaken. Jason noticed. His eyes flicked toward Alexander, irritation flashing briefly before he dismissed him. "This doesn't concern you," he said, already turning back to Emily. "Stand up." The command hung in the air, heavier now, pressing against her. Stand, or don't. Return, or resist. Her fingers tightened against the seat, and for the first time, she didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Jason's expression hardened slightly, the calm beginning to crack. "Emily," he repeated, slower this time, sharper. That tone, the warning. But before it could turn into something worse, Alexander spoke. "Sit." The word was quiet, but it carried a level of authority that didn't need volume. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a challenge. It was a command. Emily froze, not out of fear, but because something about it felt different. It didn't demand control. It already had it. Jason turned fully now, his attention shifting completely. "And who exactly are you?" he asked, his voice tightening as the composure began to slip. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, his gaze steady, as if this entire interruption meant nothing to him. Then he looked at Jason, not with anger, not with curiosity, but with quiet assessment. "Someone you shouldn't be speaking to," he said. The response was simple, but it landed with weight. Jason's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not in front of Emily. "Stay out of this," he said, stepping closer. "This is my wife." Alexander's expression didn't change. "No," he said. The single word cut through the moment. A pause followed, just long enough to make the correction clear. "She's under my protection now." There was no emphasis, no raised tone, no visible effort, just certainty. The air shifted instantly. Jason stared at him, confusion mixing with irritation. "You don't know what you're talking about." Alexander leaned forward slightly, his presence sharpening in a way that made the difference undeniable. "I do," he replied. Nothing more. Jason's control slipped, just enough to show, not enough to explode, but enough to reveal something beneath the surface. He wasn't used to resistance. Not like this. Not from someone who didn't react to him at all. He stepped forward again, reaching for Emily. "Get up," he said, his voice no longer calm. But before his hand could touch her, it stopped. Alexander was already there. No sudden movement. No visible force. Just presence. Jason's hand hovered in the air, his body stalling as if something unseen had drawn a boundary he couldn't cross. Alexander stood between them now, completely still, completely in control. "You're done here," he said. No emotion, no hesitation, just finality. Jason's expression shifted again, this time into something darker, less controlled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said quietly. Alexander's gaze held his. Unmoved. "I do." That was enough. Something in Jason faltered. Not completely, but enough to break the pattern. He looked at Emily again, searching for the fear he had always relied on. It was still there, but it wasn't the same. It didn't control her the way it used to. Jason exhaled sharply, stepping back as his mind recalculated. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and certain. Then he turned and walked away. His footsteps faded down the aisle, but the tension didn't disappear with him. It lingered, heavy and unresolved. Emily didn't move. Her heart was still racing, her thoughts struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Jason had never stepped back like that before. Not without forcing control. Not without taking something with him. But this time, he didn't. Slowly, she turned her head. Alexander had already returned to his seat, his posture unchanged, his expression calm. He didn't look at her immediately. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer comfort. But his presence felt different now. Not distant, protective. After a moment, he spoke. "We're leaving." Emily blinked, her voice unsteady. "Leaving where?" Alexander stood, his movements precise, his attention already focused ahead. A place he can't reach. No hesitation. No explanation. Just certainty. Emily felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't escape anymore. This was something else, something structured, controlled, deliberate. She stood, not because she was told, because she understood. When the train slowed, they moved without hesitation. Emily stepped off first, the cool night air hitting her skin as she took in her surroundings. Everything felt unfamiliar, but not uncertain. Alexander stepped beside her, not behind, not ahead, beside. A car was already waiting, the engine running, the door unopened. No words were exchanged. No instructions were needed. Emily hesitated for only a second before moving forward. Alexander opened the door, not as an offer, as expectation. She got in, and without looking back, she left the last piece of her old life behind. The car moved through the night, carrying her away from everything she had known. The city lights blurred past the window, distant and untouchable. This wasn't safety. It was something else. Something controlled. Something powerful. Ahead, the glass fortress stood waiting. And this time, Emily wasn't running. She was being taken somewhere that would change her completely. The fortress wasn't built for hiding. It was built for control. From the moment Emily stepped inside, the difference was immediate. Glass walls stretched high above her, reflecting light in a way that made everything visible, everything exposed. There were no shadows to disappear into, no corners to retreat from. It wasn't confinement. It was structure. Jason had isolated her to make her weak. This place isolated her to make her precise. Emily stood still for a moment, her eyes taking in the space, her mind adjusting to the shift. Nothing here felt temporary. Nothing felt uncertain. Alexander walked past her without hesitation. He didn't check if she was following. He already knew, and she did. Each step deeper into the fortress felt deliberate, like crossing into something she didn't fully understand yet, but couldn't turn away from. The silence here wasn't heavy. It didn't suffocate. It watched. Alexander stopped and turned to face her. For a moment, he said nothing. His gaze moved over her, not with concern, not with judgment, but with quiet evaluation. "You're still reacting," he said. Emily frowned slightly. "To what?" "To him," Alexander replied, "even when he's not here." The words landed clean. She felt it immediately, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands stayed slightly clenched, the way her breathing hadn't fully settled since the train. He was right. "You think distance changes at," Alexander said. "It doesn't." Emily held his gaze, steady but uncertain. "Then what does?" Alexander stepped closer, his presence controlled, his voice even. Control. Not loud, not emphasized, but final. Emily stayed where she was, listening. "He didn't isolate you by accident," Alexander continued. "He removed everything around you, so you would depend on him." The truth settled without resistance. "That wasn't weakness," he said. "That was structure." Emily's expression shifted. For years, she had seen everything she went through as loss, as something taken from her. But now, for the first time, it felt different. Structured. Intentional. Something that could be understood. "Now you see it," Alexander said. There was no approval in his tone. Only acknowledgement. Emily exhaled slowly, her thoughts aligning in a way they hadn't before. If it was built, Alexander continued, it can be used. That was a shift. Not escape, not recovery. Use. Stand up straight, he said. Emily adjusted her posture instinctively. No, Alexander said calmly. Not like you're correcting yourself. He stepped closer, his movement precise as he adjusted her stance. Not forcefully, but deliberately, like you already belong here. The difference was immediate. Her shoulders settled differently. Her balance shifted. Her presence changed in a way she couldn't fully explain, but could feel. Again, he said. She reset, this time slower. More aware. Better. No praise. Just recognition. Your presence speaks before you do, he continued. If it shows hesitation, everything else will follow. Emily held her posture, her breathing steadying. 4 years, you were taught to make yourself smaller, he said. She didn't argue. To survive. True. Alexander's gaze sharpened slightly. You don't need that anymore. Not comfort. Instruction. Look at me, he said. Emily lifted her eyes. Don't look away. Her instinct was immediate, to break eye contact, to soften, to retreat. But she held it. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt controlled. Again, he said. She held his gaze longer this time. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. It stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like control. Good, he said. Then, after a pause, that's where it starts. Emily exhaled slowly, something inside her settling into place. You're still waiting for him to define the moment, Alexander said. She frowned slightly. You hesitate, he explained. You expect him to move first. She felt it. Now that he said it, she couldn't ignore it. That stops, he said. No explanation, no discussion, just an end. Emily nodded once, understanding. Alexander stepped back slightly, giving her space, but not distance. Next time you see him, he said, he shouldn't recognize you. The word stayed with her, not as fear, as direction. This wasn't about avoiding Jason. This was about becoming someone he couldn't control, someone he couldn't predict, someone he couldn't reach. Emily adjusted her posture again, this time without being told. Her shoulders relaxed, but not from weakness, from control. Her gaze steadied, not forced, not defensive, intentional. The shift was subtle, but real. Alexander watched it happen. He didn't interrupt, because this part, she had to do herself. The silence in the fortress no longer felt heavy. It felt focused. Emily stood there, no longer shrinking, no longer reacting, no longer waiting. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about escape. She was thinking about control. Alexander turned slightly, as if a lesson was complete. Then he spoke one last time. Fear is a habit, he said. Break it. And he walked away. Emily remained where she was, her posture steady, her breathing controlled, her thoughts clear. Jason's presence no longer filled her mind the same way. His voice no longer dictated her reactions. The space inside her had changed. For the first time, she wasn't the woman Jason broke anymore. The fortress didn't react when they came for it. It remained exactly as it was, still, silent, and controlled. Outside, however, everything shifted. Movement formed beyond the glass walls, calculated and precise, as if every position had already been decided long before this moment. Emily noticed it immediately. The old version of her would have felt it as fear, as urgency, as the instinct to retreat and disappear. But now, standing inside the fortress, she saw it for what it was, an approach, not chaos. A plan, not panic. Jason hadn't come alone. A rival syndicate moved with him, surrounding the structure with precision. Their presence wasn't scattered or reckless. It was coordinated, intentional, and built on the belief that they could take something from this place. They were wrong. Inside, nothing changed. The air remained steady, the silence unbroken, the structure untouched by the pressure outside. This wasn't a place that reacted to threats. It was a place that absorbed them without losing control. Emily stood near the glass, her posture steady, her breathing even. She could see Jason now, stepping forward with the same presence he had always carried, the same belief that he could take control of any situation he entered. But something about him felt different. He wasn't weaker, but he was no longer in control. For years, he had defined every space she stood in, shaping her reactions before she could even think. But hey, that pattern didn't exist. The fortress didn't recognize him the way her old life had. "Stay here," a voice said behind her. Emily didn't respond. Her focus remained ahead, her thoughts clear, her body unmoving. She already understood what this moment required. This wasn't about stepping back or waiting to be protected. This was about standing. The entrance opened with quiet precision, not forced, not rushed, but deliberate. The separation between inside and outside disappeared, creating a single line that could be crossed. Emily stepped forward. The air outside felt heavier, but it didn't slow her. Each step she took was measured, controlled, and intentional. She didn't hesitate, and she didn't look back. Jason's attention locked onto her instantly. "Emily," he said. His voice was steady, but the control behind it wasn't the same. It didn't carry the same certainty, the same authority that once dictated everything she did. She stopped a few steps away from him, her posture straight, her gaze level. She didn't lower her eyes, and she didn't shift her stance. There was no hesitation in her presence, no trace of the woman who used to react before thinking. Jason studied her carefully, searching for something familiar, something he could still control. He didn't find it. "This doesn't change anything," he said, his tone tightening slightly. "You're coming back with me." The words landed, but they didn't carry weight anymore. Emily held his gaze, her expression calm and steady. "No." Jason's jaw tightened, the shift in his control becoming more visible. "You don't get to decide that." "I already did." Her voice remained level, controlled, and final. For a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them felt different now, no longer defined by his authority, but by a refusal to accept it. Jason stepped forward slightly, his frustration beginning to surface. "You think this changes who you are?" Emily didn't step back. "It does." There was no hesitation in her answer, no uncertainty behind it. The words weren't defensive. They were settled. Jason's expression hardened as he tried to regain the control that had always defined him. "You're nothing without me." That sentence had once been enough to break her. Now, it did nothing. Emily's gaze remained steady, her posture unchanged. "That's where you were wrong." There was no anger in her voice, no need to prove anything. The truth stood on its own. Behind her, movement shifted quietly. Alexander's men were already in position, their presence controlled and precise. They hadn't acted earlier because they didn't need to. Now, they did. Jason noticed the change, just as the men with him began to realize it as well. The confidence they arrived with started to fade, replaced by hesitation. This wasn't a place they understood, and it definitely wasn't a space they controlled. Emily didn't look away from Jason. She didn't need to see what was happening behind her. She could feel it, the certainty, the structure, the control that surrounded her now. "This isn't your place," she said. Her voice remained calm, but the meaning was absolute. Jason's frustration broke through more clearly. "You think you belong here." Emily didn't hesitate. "I do." The answer came without effort, without doubt. Jason was trying to take control. She was already in it. Behind her, the situation resolved itself without chaos. Movements were efficient, controlled, and final. The rival syndicate lost its footing without a fight, their plan collapsing under the weight of a structure they couldn't break. Jason stood still, the last of his control slipping as he realized there was nothing left for him to take. Emily held his gaze for a moment longer. "I'm home." The words were quiet, but complete. There was no argument left to make, no control left to reclaim. Jason didn't respond. He didn't need to. He was removed from the space with the same control precision everything else had followed. No struggle, no noise, no chaos. Just finality. The silence that followed felt different. Not heavy, settled. Emily stood there for a moment, her posture steady, her breathing even, her thoughts clear. Then she turned and walked back inside. Alexander stood exactly where he had been, his presence unchanged, his gaze steady. He didn't ask what happened, and he didn't need an explanation. He had already seen enough. Emily walked toward him without hesitation, each step reflecting the shift that had already taken place. She stopped beside him, not behind, not below, but exactly where she chose to stand. Alexander looked at her, his expression calm, his assessment complete. There was nothing left to question. Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. The transformation was already done. The fortress remained what it had always been, a place of control, structure, and power. But now, she stood within it differently, not as someone hiding, not as someone being protected, but as someone who could exist in that space and not be broken. And for the first time, she was no longer someone Jason could ever control again.